Welcome to Human Together, where we dive into the power of connection, shared stories, and leadership. I'm Linnea Miller, founder and CEO of Long Table. And on this podcast, we'll hear from inspiring individuals who have embraced the journey of being fully human, both in their personal and professional lives and in their communities. Together, we'll uncover leadership lessons that empower us to thrive, not just in our careers, but in the ways we engage with each other every day. Because when we have a healthy relationship with ourselves, we can thrive with others. Let's explore how we can lead, live, and grow by being human together. All right, today's episode of the Human Together podcast is going to be a really great episode. I am so excited for you listeners to be able to join me in a conversation with somebody that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And I know that you are going to benefit from learning from this guest as well. My guest today is Dwayne Vaughn, and he is of Gone Outdoors Fine Photography. Fine art photography, maybe.
Yes.
And Dwayne's story is incredible. Dwayne's journey has been amazing. And I think it's just such a perfect story to be able to tell, a conversation to be able to be had on the Human Together podcast, because on the Human Together podcast, we are all on our journey. We're on our journey to become human, to know ourselves and to lead ourselves while doing it together with other people, knowing others, leading others in a way that makes our world a better place. And so I couldn't think of a better guest to have on today's show than Dwayne. And Dwayne is a photographer, and through his photographs, he shares personal stories that highlight the beautiful details of the natural world that often go unseen. He finds purpose in his work by creating awareness of his surroundings, harnessing the healing power of nature, and being a voice for those with accessibility needs. With his camera, he heals himself, and through his photographs, with grace and gratitude, he passes that healing energy on to all of us. And I can't wait for this conversation. I'm so excited to have you welcome you, Dwayne, to have you with us. And I just love the idea of your journey of trading wings for wings. That's the kind of cue up I'm going to set up on this conversation. Perfect. And I just want to thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been, I think we were talking before we started the show, if I would have tried to design this in any kind of way, the way my life's turned out, I would have just gotten in my own way. And so it was just kind of that surrender and just letting things unfold and trusting in a higher power that was able to just let time guide its way through the story. And and then I'll share with you how my wings became wings.
I love that. I mean, I think nature, nurture, and choice influence all of our leadership, our personal leadership, nature, nurture, and choice. And so I would love to start with nurture a little bit, just a little bit about your story, your journey. Tell me where you grew up. Tell me a little bit about how this journey of trading wings for wings began.
Yeah, absolutely. So grew up here in Georgia native, South Side kid from Jonesboro. Grew up, spent my whole life down there until I went to college. Went to college in Florida at Embry-Riddle University down in Daytona. Always knew what I wanted to do. Started flying here in Georgia at Charlie Brown Airport, Fulton County, over by, I think was that Douglas County. When I was 8 years old was the very first time that I went to go take a flight. And they had it was like Little League, but for flying, I guess, if you will. Yes, I'd go there on Saturdays, and they would teach us all about aviation and everything and just get us kind of prepped for a life as a pilot. And I just had that singular focus. I knew what I wanted to do. I loved every second of what I did for my job. Feel extremely grateful the fact that I got to do a job that brought me just joy every day. And it really became a part of my life, not a part of my identity, which is an important part of the story, but a part of my life. And so kind of that tapestry, it was woven into that tapestry of my life, but I never identified as a pilot. I wasn't going into the party and being like, hey, I'm Dwayne, I'm the pilot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was, I never offered up what I did because that didn't define me. And so I didn't, and it is kind of one of those hot things where you say you're a pilot and everybody's like, oh, tell me more.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want that to be part of the story. So I never really even talked about it in that way. And went to college, started working for the airlines in 2003. I was a commercial airline pilot. Flew until 2016, which I thought was going to be the rest of my life, but there was other plans. And in 2016, I had an injury to my foot. Training for a triathlon, broke my foot, very small fracture. Should have been something that just healed right up and would have been good to go. And days and days and days, then months and months and months after everything, I'm still in excruciating pain. And don't know what's going on. Luckily, I had an amazing orthopedic. He knew what was going on, but just quite wasn't ready to get to that point because he knew that was going to be the end. Because as a commercial airline pilot, you must maintain what they call a Class 1 medical. And so he knew at that point where it was diagnosed, I would no longer be able to hold my medical and I wasn't going to be able to fly anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I appreciated his care and compassion and understanding in that part too, of knowing that he wasn't just frivolously throwing a diagnosis at me, that he knew was going to change my life.
Yeah.
It was even funny when he first told me, he was like, this is where I think we're going with this, but don't go home and Google it. Because he knew that it was going to be something serious. And so what he ended up diagnosing me with was complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS, formerly known as RSD. And it's the best kind of short way I can explain it is my brain still gets the pain signal even though my foot healed.
Wow.
Yes. And so, and it can come from any kind of break, and there's no rhyme or reason. And part of the reason why you can't be healed and I couldn't get the medical back was because it is still what they call an infant disease, and they don't know what causes it. So there are no treatments, minus opiates and usually just a bunch of other medical drugs. And that was kind of part of a hard place to be in too.
Absolutely.
With that kind of diagnosis and going, so this is my life now, just pills.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that I'm going to be able to control my life is to, just constantly just take pills. And they were causing me to tune out. It's just that cycle you get into with prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And so it had really just put me into a dead end. And so at that point, that was December, I think, of 2016, I was diagnosed. At that point, I was living at 8, 9, 10 out of 10 pain every day. Most of the times balled up on the floor, fetal position, just sobbing, just wanting it to end. Why he didn't want me Googling it, one of the very first things that comes up with it is CRPS, the suicide sentence, because that's kind of where it feels like it takes you. It, abruptly, it just snatches your life away from you. It's not even one of those things that is happening in any kind of way. And the extent of which you're in pain, you can't do anything. Your body goes into that fight, flight, freeze when you're in pain. So your brain is shutting down. It's just in survival mode. Right. And so that was it. And so now I'm just on the floor crying every day, wanting it to end. And got really, really depressed. Really, I had gone full tilt the other side. How
would you contrast that from? How would you describe your mindset, your leadership, your personality before dealing with this diagnosis, and then during?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that question because that's a really important part of the story. Before being diagnosed and before the accident, I was very achievement oriented. very perfectionism, very much so things had to be a way. And fast forward the story, come to find out that's fear driving you.
Yeah.
Didn't know who I was. But if everything was a certain way, that's why I love my job. Everything was a certain way. There is no divert. Nobody wants the pilot getting creative.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's no, you go in, you follow your checklist, you get me from point A to point B, period.
Right.
And so even my job was designed for who I was. I, air quote that, who I was.
Yeah.
And so very outdoors, very, I always joke. My nieces had to teach me how to watch television when I first, was on bed rest because I never was inside. Wow. I didn't know how to stream. I didn't know how to do this and that. It was, if I was home, I was outside doing something, fly fishing, whatever, something outside.
Yeah.
I've always been like that since I was a kid. I was a kid that got in trouble for being out past the lights being off,
Yeah.
And so that was just who I was. So very achievement, very much perfectionism, very much active.
Were you able to, or are you able now, or were you able then to be able to understand where that drive for both perfectionism and achievement came from?
No. And where that happens is at that low point. So I actually ended up in a residential rehab center. And during that process, I had an amazing therapist that helped me. It was both for mental health and for pain treatment. And while I was there, my therapist, I was learning so much and all this stuff that I had never heard of before, and all of a sudden one day I'm talking to him and he said, I was telling him, I'm like, gosh, I just have learned so much and I'm just so grateful for this experience. I'm coming up on the end of my time while I was there and everything, just like, my friendships that I've made and understanding each other because you're in there. We called it gin pop. Everybody's in together. So it's whether you have addiction, mental health, pain, everybody was in together. But, you start learning from each other and how we don't have the same stories, but our stories are very parallel.
Yes.
So you start developing that bit of empathy. And so as I'm talking to Vic and telling him about all this, he goes, all right, well, let me ask you a question. I'm a magic genie. And right now in this moment, I can take you back to July 30th, 2016 and take it all away and you can go on your next flight. Or you can keep that knowledge. What do you do?
Wow.
And it did not take me but 5 seconds to go, I'll keep the knowledge.
Wow.
And that was which is picture 4 in my timeline series, is called the changeover point.
Yeah.
And that was that moment where it went from, this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me.
Wow. Say that again.
This isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. Yeah.
That's incredible to journey through life and know that life is difficult. And again, I'm sure that people who are listening to your story today, they may have a different lived experience, but I'm sure their lived experience has also included hardship and struggle and, imagining a life going a certain way and then having it completely changed and having that rug pulled out from under you. And I think especially when a lot of people use control as a strategy or perfectionism as a strategy for control, right, in life. And yet coming to that place where you lose all control and the tools that you had before at your disposal to keep you safe are no longer able to be there, and going to the depths of despair, really, that it sounds like you went to, and still understanding that this is happening for me, that it's starting to impact your purpose, that it's connecting to your purpose and your true purpose. What you maybe thought prior to that diagnosis was, you probably would have told people your purpose is, to fly and to do this and to, be achiever and all of the amazing athletic things that you did. And now all of a sudden you start to shift, and being willing to find gratitude in the midst of that pain is really incredible. Will you tell us a little bit about how you were able, what sources of strength did you grab onto to start to realize that this is working for me, for my own good, not against me?
Yeah. So, and that's a part that, the gratitude that is still in me each day that keeps pushing me forward each day is my family. Knowing that I had their support, whether it's your family, whether you're a friend to somebody, whether you're a partner, a spouse, whether you're just another human with another human.
Yeah.
If we know that we have a glimmer of somebody cares about me, that's when I got to that low point where I went, I can't do this because I have a family that loves me. I have a family that cares about me, and this would devastate them. It's the easy way out for me,
Yeah.
but the pain that I'm going to create for them, my friends, my family, was the part where it pulled me out. And, you were saying about flying being my purpose, being my purpose. That's what I always say. I'm like, for me, it was, and I've gotten to do now, I just live in this space of gratitude because it's like I get to do a whole nother career now that I'm just so grateful for. And I'm like, who gets to have one job that they love doing? I get to do two.
Yeah.
And so, but it's like before it was like I got to do my passion. Now I'm doing my purpose.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I figured it out. I was like, it was like, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a pilot. I want to be a pilot. I'm like, okay, I'll let you do that.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, now your will is done.
Yeah.
Now it's time for my will.
That's good.
Because I have something so much greater for you to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Divine purpose.
A divine purpose.
Yeah.
And that's where those shifts then started happening and coming from and being able to go, all right. It was one of those, I grew up a cradle Catholic, and it's very rote. You go, they say, sit, stand, kneel, fight, fight, fight. And that's church.
Right.
You just repeat it on Sundays and that's it. And I've become very rote in my, spirituality. And it was just day to day, mostly just Sunday, where, there was that little touch point. And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe something greater than me, greater than us, does care and is guiding me. Yeah. And then just kind of sitting with that, there's a lot of quiet time, a lot of silence, a lot of moments to just, really meditate in on, okay, what's guiding me right now?
Yeah.
And it was, this isn't you anymore.
Yeah.
It was not me. I wasn't in control at all.
Well, it's part of integrating that human experience where we have to reintegrate our life. I believe that oftentimes when you see children, they're fully integrated.
Yes.
Right? They are just they show up as their true selves, right?
Yeah.
And they almost can't be fake.
Correct.
Right? And then we go through life, and I think that as life happens, we're trying to protect ourselves. We have this self-worth protecting. And so we start to de-integrate, right? And we become disconnected. We start adopting strategies to get approval, maybe.
Correct.
We start adopting strategies based on that fear. There's an interesting tool that we have, and it's called the self-preservation tool. And Andy Stanley is my pastor, and he says, pay attention to the tension. And so when the tension starts to build up in us, oftentimes that's coming from a place of self-preservation. And ultimately, there's nothing wrong with self-preservation in that our self is worth preserving. But when we are using strategies that are no longer serving us to preserve a self that maybe isn't even the true self, all of a sudden we start having more harm. We start doing more harm to ourselves. And the byproduct of that is actually creating harm with others, right?
Correct.
And so the self-preservation tool really asks us 3 questions. The self-preservation says, What am I trying to prove? What am I trying to hide? What am I afraid to lose?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to think of those questions when you were in this process of really having to re-normalize who you are, rebirth, almost a rebirthing process, it
Yes.
sounds like. When you think about that self-preservation, what was I afraid to lose? What was I trying to hide? What was I trying to prove? Do any of those questions stand out as a significant where you were able to engage with that question, get clarity, and move forward?
Yes, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head with the rebirth. And that's exactly how I've seen this whole thing. It was a death of self. It was, this accident was a death of self. And from that, like, I called July 30th now my birthday.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm just, what year is this? This is 2005. I'm 9 years old this
9
year in
years
July.
old?
Yeah.
Oh, almost
So-
going back to that same 8-year-old boy
Yes.
who discovered flying.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
here you are 8+ years later and rediscovering your wings.
My wings, yeah. And so in that self-preservation mode, yeah, you nailed it. It becomes a tactic of that uniform. It's like, the comic book character's uniform. Put on my pilot
Yeah.
uniform, and
cape.
now I have power, and now I look professional, and now I do this, and now I do that. So you can't see I'm a mess at all because I look perfect.
Yeah.
My shirt is crisp. My hat is pointed. It's just everything is perfect. And what do I have to lose? I have to lose that you're going to find out that I'm a scared little boy inside. And that is then going to lose my safety. And now I have everything to fear. And now I'm completely vulnerable,
Yeah.
which is the most important thing that you'll find out is when you hit that space of being completely vulnerable is when you're going to find yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you either have to just keep working harder at those strategies that aren't serving you, or you have to surrender.
That's it.
And that's what you started with is
Yes.
surrender. So tell us about what was your path forward after coming to that place with your therapist where you were able to realize, wow, this hardship is actually for me. This is actually serving me. Tell us about how did your path start shifting and taking you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kept journeying, life kept lifing, and in the surrender though. And, I remember a lady at church, was a couple that would sit in front of us all the time. And she looks at me one day, and this was before I had gone to the rehab facility, and she hands me this little book that I've still never read to today. It's probably 30 pages maybe. All I had to do was read the title. It said, God will use this for good.
Oh, wow.
And that's all I needed to know. It still sits on my desk, and it's right there. And so all these little things that I've been able to pay attention to because I'm self-aware, I'm aware of my surroundings, and see all of how the universe works in tandem. It's like the aspen trees. When they figured out the aspen trees aren't individual root systems.
Yes.
The aspen trees are all from one root.
Yes.
And that's how I see us. That's how I see humanity. We're that aspen tree system.
Yep.
So what affects me affects you.
Yeah.
What affects you affects me. And so being able to be in that, and then you were talking about what's pay attention to the tension.
Yeah.
It's interesting because with CRPS, part of the thing that will raise your pain level is a raise in your heart rate.
Yeah.
So the more stressed I am, the more vigilant, the more whatever it is that raises my heart rate will raise my pain level.
Right.
So it became like a reverse superpower of I had to pay attention to what's causing me tension and go, is that worth the pain?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, some things might be worth the pain.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything right now, but there's going to be worrying about where the remote control was put and getting my heart rate up, not worth the pain.
Somebody cutting you off in traffic.
Somebody cutting me off in traffic, not worth
Yeah.
the pain. Maybe having to do a 10-hour car ride to go to a grandparent's anniversary or something like that, worth the pain. And so throughout all that, I'm working and I'm working and I'm working and understanding all this. And I was at the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, which is for spinal cords and TBIs.
Yeah.
And they accepted me into their physical therapy program.
Wow.
And which put me in another space of what we'll talk about here in a second called the gray.
Okay.
And while I'm there, I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't have a spinal cord injury. Like, what's wrong with you? And I don't have a TBI. So why are you here? You know, okay, they allowed you to come here or whatever. But again, I had to go, everything so far has had a purpose. So sit in the purpose and just trust. And I had never gone bird watching in my life. Didn't much pay attention to the birds because I was so focused on being perfect.
Yeah.
Didn't have time to watch the birds and smell the flowers.
Yeah.
I signed up for a bird watching field trip with the Shepherd Center.
Wow.
It was my very first time I had really been out of the house since the accident. It was a group field trip. I felt safe though because I was with other people. I would always feel like, you know, I was holding everybody up because at this point I'm in either a walker, a wheelchair, or a mobility chair. So that's, you know, again, gone from training from a triathlon to now I'm in a mobility device.
Wow.
And so I felt comfortable enough, though, going on this trip with them. Get a brand new mobility scooter, ready to go. Got all the energy together to go do this. We go out the next day to go do the trail. The scooter doesn't work.
Oh, no.
You want to talk about my heart rate going up?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Yeah, so this is why I don't come out of the house.
Yeah.
And one of the amazing, amazing therapists there, she pulls me aside. We go sit over at the visitor center. And she says, you know, well, Dwayne, you know, you can listen to the birds and identify them by sound and stuff like that. And if you guys could see me right now, you'll see my eyes roll really hard because that's what they were doing at this woman going, yeah, okay, whatever, lady. I'm in pain. I'm in like 10 out of 10 pain over here.
Yeah.
You're talking about listening to the birds.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, you know what? Again, surrender, let it go. This isn't worth the pain. What are you going to do about it? You know, so let's just calm down. Let's just take a few breaths. Let's just amuse her and let's listen to the birds. So while I'm doing that, she's like, you know, you might not be able to like say, okay, that's a cardinal or okay, that's a blue jay, but you might be able to go, ooh, that sounds different than that one. And so we close our eyes and we're doing that. And all of a sudden I realize my pain's not as bad as it was a little bit ago.
Oh, wow.
And then I realized my pain's not as bad as it was a little while ago. And it just keeps going down. And so I was like, So then I go home and I start watching the birds and closing my eyes and paying attention to the sounds. And all of a sudden I realized by doing that, it became this meditation. And it was lowering my heart rate, which was lowering my pain.
Wow.
The first time.
It was actually healing you.
It was healing me. And at that point, I had done numerous medical interventions. Nothing really worked. And all of a sudden, listening to the birds is calming my pain down.
Wow. Wow.
And I was like, huh. So then it got me interested in, you know, I would sit there and I'd watch the birds and I would go, you know, remember back to Da Vinci, you know, and being, you know, his creation of the flying machine. It was basically a sketch of a bird. And I'm going, the bird is the airplane. And so I would sit there and watch them, especially like the larger birds, the birds of prey and things like that. You know, you watch them come in and it's like their landing gear are going down with their legs and their wings are so big. You'll actually see almost like their flaps coming down in the back of the wings and all this. And I'm going, that's a legitimate airplane.
Wow.
Which it is.
Yeah.
It's the archetype of the airplane.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there watching them and I'm like, gosh, that'd be cool to capture, you know, in like a high speed camera and da-da-da-da. And so I go get my camera and I've always loved photography and it just became this thing for a way for me. Again, it was just healing. I would go out. I never go out and still to today, I never go out to shoot a photograph. There's no plan in it. I go out to live my life, to be in peace, to heal. And then those photographs are just part of my story.
Wow.
And so that's how I then moved forward into Gone Outdoors. I had a good friend of mine, his mom actually worked with my mom in the school system, principal's assistant principal with each other. And he would keep in touch with me, and just, again, having those people that just stay connected,
Community.
that tether.
Yep.
You're tethered in an untethered situation.
Yeah.
And that's who those people were. And he's like, man, you got to show these things to people. And I'm like, nobody cares. And all of a sudden, I decided to show them to somebody. And I put 6 of them into a competition. 5 of them were accepted. 4 of them won awards.
Wow.
First show out.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was here in Georgia, in Duluth, at the Hudgens Art Center. Yep.
The Hudgens Center for the Arts.
Yes. And the director and the curator there have just become such great friends. And again, they're another one of those touch points because they instilled so much confidence in me. And, they didn't have to take that time to connect with me. And they did. And it gave me that sense of, okay, why not me? They believe in me. Believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Why are you always waiting for somebody else to believe in you? Just go out there and share your story and see what happens. And so I bring my portfolio around, and I have 3 months later my very first solo exhibition.
Wow.
Yeah. And then from there, it's just been like solo. I won some international awards. And then just recently, I just got back from France. I was doing a artist residency in the south of France with La Maison de Beaumont, and which was just an amazing experience. But it just kept growing and growing and growing.
Right.
But again, it was part of this, I read some years ago which I didn't know, again, was a precursor to what was going to be happening, was Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, I'm now living the surrender experiment. This stuff is just happening. By losing control, everything fell into place.
Yeah.
It was the loss of control that started to form this. I don't even want to call it control anymore because it's not. It just... I don't even know. Sometimes I literally go speechless in trying to define it sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where you almost can't tell people. Like, I'm so grateful to be able to share my story, and hopefully it translates in some way to somebody and it's going to help them in their story. And I always say, I never want to wish it on somebody to have to go through this, but there's something in going through that fire that you can't teach to somebody else. It's almost an intangible, it's just, I can't write it in a book. I can't necessarily tell it to you. You're going to have to find it in yourself.
Well, it's so interesting because there's so much paradox in what you're talking about, because I think this whole tension and paradox in your life from a very young age of, it's almost a conflict, but in a great way of being tethered and flying. And it's, in your first chapter of your life, you were drawn to this flying, to soaring, to having wings. And yet you were tethered by fear and perfectionism and needing to kind of portray an image that you've got it together. And now you have found your wings. You are flying. You are soaring, and your tethering is no longer fear. Your tethering is community.
Yes.
It's that human together piece. It's that part of like having a community that functions. I love that example of the aspen trees. They say it's the world's largest living organism.
Yes.
Is the aspen, I think it's an aspen grove out in Colorado, I read.
Yep.
There's an amazing book I would love to tell listeners about. It's called From Strength to Strength by Arthur C. Brooks. It's amazing. And he talks about in our life, basically our journey of the things that made us successful in the first half of life are not the things that will help us find our purpose in the second half of life. And so he talks about that, and he uses the example of the aspen trees. That's the only reason why I've heard of that before. And I actually, speaking of art, I have a painting in my office. It's right above my computer monitor, and it's of an aspen tree, and it looks like it's all by itself on a cliff.
Yes.
And the reality is that is actually not alone. And yet that's how we feel. Oftentimes we feel that we are alone, and we have to be tethered to this world by our own strength.
Yes.
By our own performance and by our own achievements, when really if we actually are able to look at the truth and to see the truth in ourselves and to see the truth around us, we are actually being tethered and anchored by this vast organism of humanity that surrounds us, right? And I just think I've seen your art, and I really want our listeners to go, and I want you to be able to share in a minute about how they can also experience your art. But I think the reason why you are able to find such success in that surrendering and in that releasing of your art and of your healing is because healed people heal people. And I think your art is an expression of your healing. And when people are experiencing that art, they are also, whether they realize it or not, they are able to experience healing in themselves. And it's probably what draws people to your art. I think it is just such a beautiful thing. So do you believe that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, not only do I believe it, I've experienced it. And, you know, part of, I would reference, and that's part of my next exhibition that I'm creating right now. Hopefully I'll have ready to open it around 26. But it's called The Gray. And what that was again, that sense of isolation. And why I call it the gray was, you know, it's that mix of the black and white. It's in the middle.
Yeah.
And throughout my entire life, I've always felt like I was in the middle, whether it was racially, whether it was economically, whether it was success, whatever it was, somehow it's like I always found myself in the middle, which was such an uncomfortable place. And it feels very alone in the middle.
Yeah.
And then when I was, it was actually when I was at the Shepherd Center, I was at a grocery store, and I was on one of the little mobility scooters, and I had to reach up and grab a cereal box, and I had to stand up, which I can do. And it made me think about people that couldn't stand up. And I'm going, So I would call myself high functioning disabled.
Yeah.
But it had this overwhelming sense of emotion when I stood up to grab that box. And what happened was I realized in that moment that because I had been in the middle, I had lived this life of activity. Now I've lived this life of being mobility limited. And because I had the both, I had developed this sense of empathy. And so the gray is where you form empathy.
Interesting. Wow.
And so the gray becomes the superpower.
Wow.
The gray becomes where it all comes together, and I can look at you and I can look at anybody else and go, I don't know you, I don't know your story, but I know that you're a part of me. Because black and white make the gray.
Yeah.
So your story is part of my story.
Yeah, that part of that organism.
Is part of that organism again. Yeah. And so I had an exhibition, and it had the Timeline series, which was the first one that I created. And it's a series of 10 photographs that tell my story through the use of birds. And which was interesting at the time. I tell people, they're like, how'd you come up with this? And I'm like, it was seriously divine. Like, it was almost like I blacked out, and all of a sudden I had an art exhibition.
Wow.
Like, I don't really remember titling it. I don't really necessarily remember coming up with it. It was just like it came out of me. And I had it up at a gallery, and a young lady came in, and who you would not normally probably see in an art gallery. They were there for, it was like a community activity. And she starts going through the photographs of mine and starts nailing them. And she is going, this one represents this. This one represents this. And I'm like, she Googled this? Like, who are you? Like, are you stalker? Like, what's happening here right now? And all of a sudden, the director and I look at each other, and we both have tears in our eyes. And we're going, what is happening? And I realized that she wasn't telling my story. She was telling her story.
Wow.
but our stories paralleled. Again, the stories are always usually the same. We just have our own experiences in them. And to have that moment of connection with her through that just gave me that greatest sense of, okay, I'm doing my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm doing my purpose.
Doing my purpose.
Yeah. And so that healing is just continuously, I can see it, I can feel it. And it is, to me, it's the greatest asset I feel like I have in my photography, is that, again, it's like you said at the beginning, I use the camera to heal myself. Through the photographs, I pass the healing energy on to you. And that's how I see it, as like, if I'm intentional about creating this photograph and using it as a space of my healing, when you look at it, I believe that energy is going to radiate out of that. And if that's part of your story, you're going to connect with it.
Because we're all connected.
Because we're all connected.
We're human together.
Yes.
Yes. What wisdom would you offer to listeners maybe facing their own season of the season of having to rebuild, that season of having to overcome self-preservation, that season of having to relearn how to find their wings? What would you offer? What wisdom would you offer from your experience?
So my style, I guess, what do I want to call it? My, who I've become, I feel like, is a piece of a little Brene Brown, a little Michael Singer, a little Ted Lasso, and a little Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good group there.
That's how everything has kind of melded itself together. And the Wizard of Oz part I've been fascinated by that movie since forever. It was always fascinating to me. And as an adult, and then obviously with Wicked and all that, I mean, I couldn't believe it the first time I saw Wicked, because I actually saw it during my trauma experience.
Oh, wow.
And so, not to spoil anything, I'll stop there. If you haven't seen it, which I think the world has.
Yes.
But what I'll give as a piece of wisdom is from that, and is to remember you've always had the power. You've always had the power, Dorothy. And it seems like such a throwaway line. But if you can remember that you were born by a greater power than yourself, and that energy was already instilled in you, that's instilled in every single one of us, that we move and everything vibrates and moves together. We are a single organism. Then you can remember that together, human together, and individually, you have the power.
You have the power. I love that. I love that. That is so great. Thank you so much. I knew your story would be a story that the world needs to hear. And I'm so grateful that you are able to, and that you are generous with your story. Oftentimes people are not generous with their story because it requires a lot of vulnerability, and vulnerability takes courage. So that's that Brene Brown part, right?
Yes, exactly.
That having that courage,
getting through the shame.
Getting through the shame.
That shame will hold you down every time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exist.
Yep.
We put that on ourselves.
Yep.
The shame is totally on ourselves. And, I went through another vulnerability moment. I went through a divorce a couple of years ago. I would take my trash out at like 12 at night because I didn't want any of my neighbors to even see me, so I didn't have to address anything.
Wow.
And that's how much shame will control you.
Yeah.
To do something as crazy as take the trash out in the middle of the night so you don't have to see people.
Yep. And shame keeps us from being connected.
It keeps us from being connected. Because I isolated myself then at that point. I couldn't be part of the organism, even though you're always part of it. I couldn't feed off of the organism.
Yeah. Yeah.
We feed each other.
Yeah.
We keep each other alive, which is so important right now to remember.
That is so important right now, especially in this, in this climate in our world, and when fear and shame are such big bullies.
Yes.
And yet we do need to be connected now more than ever, fighting for that connection, overcoming those things that are holding us back, realizing that fear and shame are liars, and being able to look at that and be able to tell the truth to ourselves about ourselves.
Yes.
And starting there, then we can actually be truth tellers to others as well.
Yes.
Right?
Just that whole like, mind your soul.
Yeah.
You know, center yourself and don't use fear and shame as a tactic to try to shame somebody else into doing right.
Yeah.
Use empathy.
Yeah.
Use empathy. Always
in the gray.
You know, I try to always remember, I don't know your story. I don't know what happened to you this morning. I don't know what happened to you at 5 years old. That formed you to be who you are today. So if I can remember that always, I can always meet you where you're at today, right now, in this moment.
I love that. Well, I would love for you to share with us where people can follow you, where they can find your artwork. There may be somebody that is listening right now and they are in their own season of despair. They are in their own, they are locked down by their own struggles that they're facing, their own pain that they're facing, the way that their life isn't going the way that they thought it was going to go. And where can they find you? Where can they find your artwork? Where can they look? We don't know if that one image of a bird or of a ladybug. I saw like a beautiful butterfly. Some of your photography, it is so incredibly healing. Where can people go to find that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website, is Gone, spelled GAWWN, outdoors.com. Same on Instagram at Gone Outdoors. Please feel free to reach out to me. I am always willing to connect with somebody. I always say if I have the time, I will. If I don't even have the time, I'll probably make the time. Because that just, again, going back to the beginning, it's having that one person.
Yeah.
It's having that one person.
Yeah.
And if I can be that one person, all right, deal.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And that's how you are making the world a better place through your journey, right? Through connecting well with others as well. So we will definitely have your contact information on our show page.
Okay, perfect.
And people can find Human Together where they get all of their podcasts. And so where do you listen to Human Together podcast?
I listen to Human Together on the Apple platform. So yeah, I am a huge Apple podcaster.
I love it.
So yes, absolutely. But yes, I'll make sure to tell all my friends to find you on all the platforms.
Yeah.
And no, it truly is an extremely important show that you have here. I cannot tell you the amount of gratitude that I have for being included in the project.
Thank you.
What you're doing is extremely important.
We hope we are bringing not only stories like yours, but tools and just sharing those stories is what helps us to be able to feed off of one another. Like you said, that organism to be able to continue to thrive and to continue to grow. And so I hope that this is healing for other people on their own journey.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much, Dwayne. It has been such a joy. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Human Together. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to reflect on how we can better understand ourselves and others in every aspect of life. Remember, when we truly see and embrace our own behaviors and tendencies, we open the door to deeper connection, better communication, and stronger leadership, not just at work, but in our communities and relationships. At Long Table, we're here to help you navigate those people problems that often hold us back, offering practical tools to change both individual and collective behaviors. Because when we thrive together, we create stronger and more resilient communities. Let's keep striving to be human together. Until next time, I'm Linnea Miller. Take care and keep growing.